flexing, putting its military might on display, a signal to the outside world, especially the U.S., that it's a force to be reckoned with. That show of strength is also taking place well beyond China's borders, and CNN Chief National Security Correspondent Jim Sciutto is here to tell us all about it.
So a military parade like this is meticulously choreographed, planned, fine-tuned, right down to the last tank, the last soldier, the color of the smoke coming out of the back of the jets flying over. And it's choreographed because it has a message. Certainly for a domestic audience, this is a message of strength to the Chinese people, 1.4 billion of them, even as the economy is faltering, but also overseas and particularly to the U.S. A message aimed at the U.S. and some of those weapons aimed at the U.S. as well.
China's massive military parade in Beijing today delivered a very clear message far away to America. On grand display in the Chinese capital, new weapons, which U.S. officials believe are designed specifically to target U.S. military assets. A new ballistic missile with the range to strike the U.S. naval base at Guam, earning it the nickname the Guam Killer. A new anti-ship ballistic missile, which analysts call the Carrier Killer, unveiled today for the first time. And high above, a flyover by China's new J-15 fighter, soon to be deployed on China's own new aircraft carrier, its first. All this today watched not just by China's elite, but Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Pentagon brushed off the show of force.
People know the strength of the United States, the strength of our military, and I think it's safe to say that we don't need to display it at parades necessarily for people to understand what the United States is capable of.
Still, as President Obama gets ready to welcome the Chinese president to Washington for a full state visit later this month, China is increasingly flexing its military muscle far from its shores. Chinese Navy ships entered waters off Alaska for the first time this week. At the same time, President Obama was visiting. And China continues to militarize man-made islands in the South China Sea, waters the U.S. considers international. We came face-to-face with the Chinese military there on board a U.S. surveillance aircraft this May.
This is the Chinese Navy. This is the Chinese Navy. Please go away quickly.
China's Navy is going to be operating increasingly as a blue water navy around the world, and the United States is just going to have to get used to it.
Though today's ceremony did not mention the U.S., a Chinese company produced this video showing a Chinese attack on forces very much resembling American ones, with an overwhelming Chinese victory.
U.S. Navy confirmed today that those Chinese ships off the coast of Alaska are heading home, but Brianna, you really can't underestimate the importance of that trip. You know, the perception had been for so long that China was only interested in things that happened very close to its borders. And now you're seeing with those man-made islands that's 600 miles away, the coast of Alaska, a few thousand miles away, and of course very close to the U.S. They are trying to project power now far beyond their borders, and that's a real message to the U.S. and a real challenge.
And they were upset when U.S. troops were going to be in northern Australia with that installation, so exactly. It really is telling. Jim Sciutto, thanks so much. Joining me now to talk more about this, we have former State Department senior advisor Christian Whiten, and we have Asia expert Gordon Chang. He's a columnist for Forbes.com. So, Gordon, you heard that report. Tell us your assessment of how urgent the China threat is.
Well, I think Beijing really would like to put in our mind the notion that they can strike us at any time. Because, you know, when a group of those missiles passed the reviewing stand today, the announcer said that they could, quote, hit Hawaii. And that certainly is a message. You know, they showed us the carrier killers, and they were very nice because what they did was they put the DF-21D on the side of that missile. Now, operationally, they would never do that, but they were sending a message by trying to sort of put those letters on the missiles. And I think that's going to be an important story for us going forward.
Christian, if you were advising administration officials now, as you have in the past, what would you say about the China threat?
Well, I'd say it's extremely belligerent. This is the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, and most people around the world are saying, you know, we should look back and take lessons on how to prevent war. And here you have China basically goose-stepping through. And it's not just soldiers and veterans, but as Gordon pointed out, very sophisticated weapons. So a very serious threat. It's a growing threat. People often compare our defense budget to China's and say, well, gee, the American defense budget is overwhelming, but we have obligations in the Middle East. We have obligations with the resurgent Russia. And, you know, this free freedom of navigation that we have guaranteed in the Pacific since 1945 to the benefit of all is really coming into question. So, we may need a bigger Navy.
That's an interesting point, Christian. You obviously saw that Russian President Vladimir Putin was at this military parade. That alliance, the Russia-China alliance, what does that mean? How troubling is that for the U.S.?
That, I think, there's a little less than meets the eye, actually. It's to Putin's benefit to go and appear next to Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader, because fewer and fewer foreign leaders want to be seen with Vladimir Putin. There's serious energy cooperation between the Chinese and the Russians, but at the end of the day, China still has deep suspicions about Russia, and Russia probably has some suspicions about 1 billion Chinese looking at its thinly populated Russian Far East. So, you have these big gas deals, Russian gas supposedly going to China, but I think there's less than meets the eye.
That's really interesting. Gordon, the president will be hosting the Chinese president soon during a visit. What message does he need to send to him about this posture, this sort of belligerent posture?
I think the most important thing that President Obama needs to convey is American will. We Americans, and you heard it from the Pentagon spokesman say, well, we have an overwhelming military presence around the world. And yes, we do, and the Chinese understand that. But the Chinese think that that's irrelevant because they think that this is an issue of will. They think that they have got lots of will, and we don't have very much of it. Now, they very well may be wrong, but the concept here is that deterrence is breaking down, and nothing ever good happens when you have an adversary believe that you are weak. So I think President Obama needs to sort of disabuse the Chinese of that.
All right, Gordon Chang, Christian Whiten, thanks so much to both of you. And coming up, check this out. Yep, high heels, mini skirts in Pyongyang. An all-girl band formed by Kim Jong-un rocks the regime.